So we're going to get started. For those of you that don't know, my name is Stephanie Evans Kingsley. I am the KWIB Executive Director, and we have got Debbie Dennison, who is my right hand at the KWIB, with us today. Just wanted to kind of give a little bit of background about these meetings that we're going to be scheduling for the first Wednesday of each month. We have identified a need to increase communication both between the local area partners and business communities with the KWIB when we find programs and initiatives that are working incredibly well in one place, and we have identified as a best practice for any particular program or group area. And we were lucky enough to have a presentation from Corey Eimer with the Northern Kentucky operator of the Brighton Center at one of our subcommittee meetings, where they had talked about a really unique and effective approach to business services in the Northern Kentucky region. So we will be setting these partner spotlights, like I said, each Wednesday in the lunch hour, with the hopes and intention that someday we'll be in person again, but for the moment, going to keep them digital. So we really appreciate the opportunity to lift up our partners across our network, so we can really highlight the good work that we're doing and see where else this might be able to be stood up and utilized in other areas with our other partners. So Corey, I am going to turn it over to you to introduce the rest of the team. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for the invitation, Stephanie, and for coordinating, Debbie. Hi, everyone. My name is Corey Eimer. I'm the Kentucky Career Center operator in the Northern Kentucky Workforce Development area. And I'm also the chair of the Northern Kentucky Workforce Partner Roundtable, which was formed toward the end of 2018. And the reason that the Workforce Partner Roundtable was formed was so that our regional workforce partners from our higher education institutions, such as Gateway Community and Technical College, from our Chamber of Commerce, to our local economic development entity, the Northern Kentucky Triad, so that we can all, and numerous other partners, so that we can all come together on a regular basis to talk about how we can better collaborate as workforce partners to serve our regional employers. And so really what we're going to talk about today is one of the ways that we've been doing that is through the strategic workforce action teams that we affectionately refer to as the SWATs. And I'm super pleased to introduce a few colleagues that I have the pleasure, and we talk on a regular basis. So I'm excited to introduce first Christy Godman, who is the Associate Vice President of Workforce Solutions at Gateway Community and Technical College. Christy is going to provide a little bit of background and process for how we came up with the SWATs. And Lisa Mulcahy, the Vice President for Workforce with the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. Lisa is going to elaborate some and talk more about how SWATs evolved over the last 3 years. It's hard to believe we've been doing these for right around 3 years now. And I've also asked Alashia Barikanoff, our workforce development consultant, who's been instrumental in helping push this effort forward with the Office of Employer and Apprenticeship Services. Alashia is going to talk a little bit about how we are in the process of creating some shared KIBES accounts amongst the Northern Kentucky workforce partners to allow us to better share information about employers with one another. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Christy Godman, who is going to review some of the history with SWATs.
Thank you so much, Corey, and thank you everyone for being here today and giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about our Northern Kentucky story. So as Corey mentioned, it was about 3 years ago exactly, October 2018, when we had a company who needed a lot of resources. Instead of giving them referrals to all of the different partners, we decided to bring all of the partners to the employer. So we literally had a round table in a conference room, and employer in the middle of that table, partners surrounding them. And hence the whole concept was born. So Corey reached out shortly after that meeting, as well as someone, Jennifer Panapinto with Northern Kentucky Triad, and said, you know, we think that was a really good way to do these meetings. What if we continue doing it? And what if we form the Northern Kentucky Workforce Partner Roundtable? So that is really where it all began. So throughout the last 3 years, there has definitely been an evolution, which Lisa will touch on more. But really, we wanted to focus on putting that employer at the middle of the table, them telling us their story, and us telling them how we can help, instead of putting all of the resources on the table for them and expecting them to navigate the system themselves. It is a complex system. It's phenomenal that we have so many resources for employers in our region and across the Commonwealth, but it's complicated and it's hard for them to navigate. So we always tell employers, this is not your full-time job, it's ours. So let us do the work in the workforce planning and the workforce strategy for you. So we, at the same time, had been working through Grow Northern Kentucky, which Lisa will share more about. And we essentially said, we have a lot of the same partners working on the SWATs and working on the roundtable as we do in Grow, specifically what we would call Pillar 3. So why don't we combine them? Why do we continue to duplicate meetings and duplicate conversations? It makes more sense for us to pull it under that umbrella and really strengthen the collective work through Grow Northern Kentucky. So I will pass it over to Lisa so she can share a little bit more about that and what we've been able to do with the collective of Grow and Lisa's leadership under that pillar to really tighten up the SWAT process.
Thanks, Christy. So I will go through with you just a general overview of Grow Northern Kentucky, what that is and why it is. And then I'll walk you through some of the continuous improvement efforts that we've kind of put forward with regard to the SWAT process, in hopes that you'll take some of our learnings and not repeat some of the challenges that we've had along the way. So as Christy said, I am the Vice President of Workforce at the Northern Kentucky Chamber, but most importantly, I am the Managing Director of the Collective Impact Strategy for Workforce, Grow Northern Kentucky. Grow Northern Kentucky is growing regional outcomes through workforce. As I said, it is a collective workforce strategy. It's made up of over 75 partners across 5 different focus areas. So if you think about collective impact, the Northern Kentucky Chamber is the backbone organization of the collective impact model that is a collective impact of multiple other backbone organizations. So we always like to think of it as we're trying to turn the Starship Enterprise, because it is so broad in nature. There are 5 focus areas that really span the life cycle of the talent pipeline that include both the supply side and the demand side of our workforce ecosystem in Northern Kentucky, beginning with early childhood education, and then moving forward to K through 12, and then adult career readiness and lifelong learning. And that includes our Kentucky Career Center, as well as our post-secondary institutions. And that's really the supply side of the workforce ecosystem and the collective impact model. The demand side includes talent attraction and retention to the region. And efforts there include diversity, equity, and inclusion and immigrant integration work, as well as a regional marketing strategy for talent attraction and retention. And then the 5th area, which I think is probably one of the most important areas, if we did everything else right and we didn't do this component, I feel like we would be at a huge miss. And that's employer policy and practice. We're really talking a lot about job quality and what that means, not only to businesses that we're seeking to serve, but also what does that mean for our community and those who are seeking opportunities. So with those 5 focus areas, we really try to do a good job of communicating what's happening across that workforce ecosystem and coordinating partner efforts so that we're all working toward a common agenda to really move the work further and faster than we've ever done before. And this is really where the SWATs fit in nicely, because it is all about partnership. It's all about knowing how each partner is working with the employer and how we can move that employer forward to really activating the resources that have been presented to them. So with that, we launched our first SWAT meeting, and I should probably mention that we've had 34 SWAT meetings with 31 employers. And we've done, as you can see from those numbers, we've done a couple of SWAT meetings with the same employers because they've needed a follow-up. They've needed just a refresher. As Christy said, it's complicated. Our workforce ecosystem can be very complicated for employers. So we decided that after, probably the first 10 or 15 SWAT meetings that, we really needed a process in place, and a couple of things bubbled up. First of all, we started surveying our employers, and we've collected 24 employer surveys. And a couple of the questions that we've gotten on the feedback from employers is, have you found the SWAT meetings to be effective? And out of 5 stars, we've received 4.71 as an average rating. And then we've also asked them, did we exceed expectations? And we've received 4.8 out of 5 stars. But I think one of the most important questions that we ask our employers is, how likely is it that you are going to follow up with some of the resources that are presented? And we've received 4.96 average rating out of 5 stars on that one. So we're very hopeful that these employers will be following up, which is exactly why we really are working with Alashir, and he'll tell you more about, how we're working with him to really track that follow-up and do a better job of reaching back out to employers to really help them activate the resources that we're presenting. So surveys, that's one thing that we really implemented early on. And we do a follow-up survey after 6 months. We initially did it after 3 months, and that just was not enough time to give the employer to really do some substantial follow-up with partners. So we do a follow-up survey after 6 months just to say, hey, did you follow up? How's it going? It's just it's a touch base of saying, we're opening up the door again. Here's some additional information. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. And oh, by the way, can you let us know how you're doing, with this 2-question survey? But I think one of the key pieces that we've put in place is that each SWAT meeting has a project lead. One thing that we know for sure is that we have some amazing resources across Northern Kentucky's ecosystem. And we have some awesome partners that have great relationships with employers. And at the end of the day, foundationally, everything we do is based on relationships and trust. So we found that there isn't just one partner that has the relationship. Different employers have different relationships with different organizations based on their needs. So we implemented having a project lead, and that project lead is typically the organization that has brought forward that employer to have a SWAT meeting. So they've kind of launched it, or they've been identified as somebody who has a long-term relationship with that particular employer. And basically, at the meetings themselves, that project lead is really responsible for tracking kind of the follow-up, making sure that comprehensive notes are taken. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And really just to be that touch point. So if you have any questions about all of this overwhelming information we've just presented to you, let me be that initial contact. Let me be that contact. Let me help fill in the blanks for you. They're just really that project manager, if you will, for that particular employer. So another piece of that, I just mentioned the comprehensive notes, something that we started doing that we thought was very helpful to the employer, and to also make sure we were all on the same page as partners. We started collecting these comprehensive notes, and we created a template for these notes that include contact information of all of the employer partners that are at the table. So anyone from that organization that attended the meeting, their title and their contact information, as well as all of the workforce partners that were at the table and their title, their organization, and their contact information. We also collect what we call as action items. And I will tell you, each partner walks away with about 5 action items from each meeting, but those meetings generate between 30 and 50 action items for our partners to follow up on with that particular industry partner. So it can be very comprehensive. And I like to think of it as, we've created, if you will, a comprehensive plan of action. Now it's up to the employer to create a phased approach to how they activate some of these resources. They need to prioritize some of those resources that they've been presented on, what they want to activate first. So we follow up. We usually try to follow up within the first 48 hours. They get these comprehensive notes and these action items. And within the first week, our partners kind of hold themselves accountable for following up with that particular industry partner on their action items. We always recommend that the employer create a file folder in their email so they can just dump their SWAT meeting, notes, and then follow up accordingly from that. But the comprehensive notes have been really helpful for us just to understand who was doing what. And just to follow back up with some of our partner roundtable meetings on, hey, where are you with XYZ with this particular employer? So with that, I am going to pass it off to Alice Shear to kind of tell you a little bit about that follow-up and what that could potentially look like in the future.
Hey, thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alice Shear, and I'm with the Kentucky Career Center's Office of Employer and Apprenticeship Services. We are within state government, and I'm a consultant for the Northern Kentucky and the region. So I have two regions. I have my counterparts on here that cover the other parts of Kentucky. And so part of our job is to engage with businesses and engage with partners to make sure business engagement is being tracked. The tracking system that we use across business engagement is on a Salesforce platform, and as we call it, KIBES. And what that stands for is Kentucky Integrated Business Engagement System. We love our acronyms, but it is highly utilized across the state. I see many business service teams on here, leaders of the teams, and it's a really good way to kind of track the engagement with companies. One of the reports that we have to submit to USDOL is the business engagement. And Kentucky is actually one of the leaders as far as engaging with the businesses of the Commonwealth. But that's a reporting piece of it. What's kind of really neat on a grassroots in the daily work is to really find out what a company has done in the workforce system. Who have they talked to? What programs have been initiated? What tax credits, apprenticeships, trainings, what have they done? Or maybe they haven't done anything. Are we missing some small businesses? Are we missing some, core industry businesses? All that is available through the KIBES system. When I joined the Northern Kentucky group and their great SWAT team and the model behind it, we were thinking, so there are 30 to 50 action items to follow after the meeting with the employer. That's a lot to kind of, keep engaged with and know what's going on, because that's not going to happen in 1 week. That's some are short term, some are long term. So we are piloting an opportunity to utilize KIBES to make sure that the SWAT team members and their action items and follow-ups are being able to be tracked. So we as a SWAT team in Northern Kentucky can see what's been going on and track that employer. A lot of times it's on the employer side, they get busy, they may not respond, but that conversation may get lost months later. But if we're able to see within the system that a couple months ago, there was an engagement done, some request sent to say, hey, do you want to hire this specific talent pool that's untapped, and the employer may have not responded, that's something to come back to and revisit again. So it's a good way to track where we've been, where we're going, and what could be possible. So as a pilot, what has been going on, and Christy Godman's excellent Excel work we have a spreadsheet now of the different companies we've met and the individual partners that have had that action item and the follow through with what they've done. Using that spreadsheet, we're going to put that into KIBES and build out the company record to show the activity that's been happening. Where this is going to come in handy is for everyone on the KIBES that has a KIBES account, they can go visit and see where the company's gone and where they're going. For anyone that doesn't have a KIBES account that is within our Northern Kentucky SWAT team, we are thinking of ways to make sure that they're able to see that company record that has had a SWAT team meeting, and to be able to see that and track it. either through read-only access. We're still in a very pilot phase to see how that's going to look. But the idea behind it is to incorporate the partners and make sure we work collaboratively to get the employer their needs met and track that. And so I think I'm excited to be with Corey, Lisa, and Christy to make it happen. And we can keep you guys updated to see where it goes, because if it's successful in this pilot SWAT version, this could be expanded to more regions. It can be expanded to more opportunities to really track an employer. As the business service team members on here, you all may have heard it from employers that they say, do you all talk to each other? Why do I get 5 knocks on the door from the workforce system? And this is one way to say, hey, we actually do talk to each other, which we do talk to each other. And this is a way to track that engagement and make sure that the employer needs are met and we know where we're going. And with that, I'll turn it over back to my SWAT partners.
There's only one thing that I didn't mention that I kind of wanted to mention to the group. You know, we talk about this being far more efficient and effective for employers, but the one thing that's really helped us as partners, I can tell the story of the partners so much better now than I could before, because we sit in those SWAT meetings and I hear Corey talk and I hear Christy talk and I hear Zach Morgan talk, and I start to learn more about everything that's happening. And I'm sure that everyone on this call can agree. So many things happen on the daily that change or are updated, or new programs or new opportunities. And it's impossible to read every single newsletter, you know, start to finish, that you receive from 500 partners. It's so nice sitting in that meeting with those core partners, hearing everything that's happening in their organization, because then you can start to really add to your toolkit when you're working with an employer, and you can really help connect the dots on a comprehensive plan for them.
That's a great point that you added, Lisa. I thank you to Christy, Lisa, Alashir. I think now we're going to open it up to questions. So I don't know how much time we have for that, but I think
we've got as much time as we need. So I think we hope to have these conversations not be so much presentation style, but really to open up the floor for folks who have questions about implementation and whether or not any of these tools are shareable. You know, the floor is yours. So whatever you have to ask these folks, we'll make sure we get through it.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Kearns. I'm with the Kentucky Career Center, Kentucky and It Works region. And Alashir shared your strategy with us earlier in the year, and we deployed the SWAT strategy at a very low level back in April. So thank you very much for sharing your best practices and thought leadership with us as we look to refine this process. I think you really answered some of my questions. The biggest challenge we've had has been the task management piece. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could assign tasks and KIBs, and then we could just look at a glance and see what the status is, because it can be a little overwhelming for one person to manage that when we don't have a shared vision. So I congratulate you on deploying that strategy. I hope the pilot works out well, and it's something we can also duplicate. I wanted to ask, are you willing to share information about your survey templates and also your template for comprehensive notes? We use a needs assessment tool now. It's like the one you may have seen that Alashir is working on, making electronic and part of KIBs. But I'd be really interested to see the format that you use rather than reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, awesome. I can share those with you.
And I do congratulate you. We've only had a couple of SWAT meetings in our region. Of course, we leave those for the larger accounts that have multiple needs and that sort of thing. But we have really found that to be exactly what you said, Lisa, a better way to understand our partners' ever-changing programs and service delivery opportunities, and to find better ways to collaborate together and not duplicate our services. So really, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I will add one thing about, us learning more about each other. When our partner roundtable first started, our very first meeting was, okay, let's learn more about each other before we try to decide how we approach employers with that information. And we've really kept that in the forefront throughout the last 3 years and started to use this as an opportunity to spread the knowledge from just Lisa, Corey, Alishir, and me to others within our organizations and other partner organizations within our community. Because the more partners we have at the table and the more individuals representing those organizations that are rotating through these SWAT meetings, the greater our reach is across the board. So we're continuing to expand our own knowledge of each other's resources, so then we can go and we can share in the community, even outside of those employers who require a SWAT meeting. Charlotte, I love your point about not every company needs a SWAT, right? So there are some companies who are not going to be able to tap more than a handful or 1 or 2 resources, nor do they have the need. We know that we have a large population of small employers in Kentucky in general. I know we have a ton of them in Northern Kentucky. We're not going to overwhelm them with resources that they would never actually tap into. So working through, and that has been a process as well, with us thinking about what employers necessitate a SWAT, what employers would really benefit from a SWAT, versus trying to do a SWAT for every employer that every organization encounters. So just a couple of additional notes that I thought might be helpful as you think about how this might work in your community, how you might be able to tweak the process, and really how you're able to, it's almost like a onboarding training or a continued professional development for your own teams within your own organizations to learn more and more about the ecosystem that we all find ourselves in. Some of us are very fortunate to have been in this world for a couple decades, and some people have not. And it's easy to forget that our team members might not have the extent of knowledge that we have about partner institutions and how you can refer employers.
I think that's very important. And to just tack on to what Christy said, our SWAT meetings are very conversational, and it's important that the employer gets to be at the front of the agenda, and they get to present about their specific workforce challenges first. And I know there are generally 3 folks who participate in SWAT meetings representing the Kentucky Career Center in Northern Kentucky. And as you all know, the Kentucky Career Center has a broad array of different types of services and partners and programming. We don't always present about the same programs every single time. We take our lead from what the employer's need is. So sometimes, you know, we will talk about our vocational rehabilitation partner and how about considering, you know, tapping into that labor or talent pool. What about apprenticeship opportunities? You know, all sorts of different things can come out of what the employer has presented to be their pain points. The other thing, the Cabinet for Economic Development is frequently on the SWATs with us, and they're always telling about tax incentives for employers who are in the midst of an expansion. You know, if that we've seen a fairly high number of employers who we've met with who are in the process of expanding, and that is the center point of their need to increase their workforce. So it really just starts with that employer and their presenting issue, and we go from there.
Corey, I have a question for you. Is your SWAT meeting your first level of engagement with your business partner, or does your team have an initial meeting to determine if there are needs for other partners to come in, or how do you handle that?
Well, that's where the project manager or project lead piece comes in that Lisa was presenting about. Normally, as individual workforce partners, we have different touch points with various employers. And once we've had that initial conversation with ex-employer and we realize that their workforce needs are varied, we recommend, okay, have you ever considered meeting with multiple workforce partners all at the same time? And we explain the concept of a SWAT meeting. And so then a SWAT meeting is called, and that project lead sort of takes the reins and coordinates a date with all the partners. And We do, Lisa has been the lead in many cases because her role at the chamber often puts her in a position to talk with a lot of employers initially. But oftentimes we don't have a separate meeting of workforce partners prior to the SWAT per se, but there is information shared about the employer with the workforce partners prior to the SWAT, so that we're coming in at least with a base level knowledge of what that employer might need.
And we've kind of reserved that for, employers that are new to the region, employers that have a big need hiring 25 plus people, or perhaps it's a larger organization that's had a change in human resource management, and that person needs to better understand the resources that are available. Of course, that's not the only reason why, we meet with employers, but those are just a couple of the guidelines that we've kind of put forward.
I'd like to add on quickly to Corey's point about listening first to the employers. I think some of the value and function of the hive mind aspect of the SWAT meeting is kind of the analysis and consult nature of the meeting and how that can affect the employer, where they may begin the meeting by listing off, hey, I've got these, big problems that are top of mind. One of them is retention. It's kind of broad. They didn't say anything about childcare, but having someone on the call who has some things to offer on childcare might pipe up and say, hey, I hear you've got some retention problems. Is childcare part of that? And that may open something up. So having the kind of the on-the-spot consult and analysis from the group often can start to pull things out that the employer might not even have thought to look for. And so that's something that I've seen happen very naturally and seems very helpful from my standpoint. I wanted to point out Corey mentioned economic development and how that's so related to workforce development. I know serving the businesses that are currently in the Commonwealth is important and priority, but we get these announcements, new businesses are moving to Kentucky, and a lot of times the HR team that's going to be within the facility, they may not know what they're getting into when they're coming to Kentucky. And having that Welcome to Kentucky package has been, I think, great. Charlotte has done it with Eberpacher. They were moving to Riverport and West Louisville, and before they even stepped foot into Kentucky, they were already knew what kind of talent they were signing up for. Her consultant, Shatrice, got them signed up for the manufacturing advisory. So they were already getting in the loop, maybe a year before they were actually in Kentucky. Protective Life in Covington, they actually also, they were moving to Northern Kentucky, and we're able to meet them, say, hey, welcome to Kentucky. This is the package that you get. These are the partners available. And they were, based out of Alabama. So they saw some similarities, but then others, they saw the differences and knew what they were getting into. So that kind of welcoming piece, I think, is also a difference maker as we welcome new business to the Commonwealth.
Alisher, we had a couple asks for that materials to be shared. I'm not sure who the welcome packet lives with, but we would love to be able to share that as well.
I don't know if, for mine, I don't know if there's like an exact physical welcome packet. I meant like us meeting the company, but I know there's Northern Kentucky has an initiative to move to Northern Kentucky, right? And live in lieu, there's some like localized, but that may be a good idea. Welcome to Kentucky. Here's the resources available. That may be a really good thing to have.
Right. And I think as we build out the SharePoint with our partners, I think that would definitely be something that we could get uploaded there.
I may have missed this, but is there a set criteria on when the SWAT team deploys and how, how often do you do it on average each month?
That's a great question. Actually, yes. So I mentioned before that we usually we have guidelines. There's nothing set in stone. We kind of live in the gray because there may be a company that's been in Northern Kentucky for 100 years and they need to hire, 15 people and they just don't even know where to start, but they have a great relationship with our career center, but they need to know a little bit more. So we may call a SWAT, for that particular reason, just depending on what their growth looks like. They may need 15 people now, but they're looking at 50 people in the next 12 months, whatever the case may be. Or if Triad actually has a new company coming to town, or if they are on one of their BR&E calls and realize that that company is going to expand. Or as I said, if one of the partners happens to be working with a company that has a new HR team and they need to better understand the ecosystem. So we'll call a SWAT for that reason. But we typically we set a goal actually to have 2 SWAT meetings a month. So that's kind of a goal that we have just within Grow Northern Kentucky. We want to make sure we're doing deep dives with companies and doing those comprehensive plans. And it also keeps top of mind for us as partners that we have these resources and we need to be sharing them. So we definitely set some goals around that.
Another nice piece of those conversations, as far as how it benefits the partners just as much as the employers, we're all hearing the challenges of these employers at the same time. And then we can have conversations offline about, are these patterns within our community and how do we put together more strategies to address this in a more structured format if we start to see the same issues coming up over and over and over again in these conversations. So it also helps, illuminate some of the patterns within the community.
And it helps to get us on the same page, singing from the same hymnal, especially about job quality. Having those same conversations across multiple organizations with our industry partners and what it means. We want to arm them with everything they need to be incredibly competitive when it comes to talent solutions. So if we're all singing from the same hymnal and sharing, the different resources that we have to break down some of those barriers and to really create true job quality in their organization, we want to make sure we're doing that. I will tell you these meetings take, and I have an agenda that I always use and that I'll send out, with the templates and things. I'll share that with you. But the meetings typically take about an hour and a half. And we always book them out. I always try to book them out 3 weeks in advance. And we have gotten to the point that we always do the meetings virtual, but we offer up a tour of the company following the SWAT meeting. So if the company wants to open up and do a tour for the SWAT team, we'll set up a separate time that the SWAT group can go and do a tour of the facility.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I won't keep everybody that full hour, and I really look forward to getting some of the follow-up that we have discussed. I think the 3 things were the spreadsheet template, as well as some of the Live Here in North Kentucky stuff that Lisa had put into the chat. And also the agenda would be very helpful as well for other folks who are looking to build this out. So
Stephanie.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Stephanie, can I just, before you end the call, I just want to thank everybody. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Smith. I work with Stephanie on the KWIB. I'm currently chair of the board. I just want to thank you all for all the work that you're doing. Northern Kentucky is very, very important to our economy and to the state. I see a lot of faces on here, whether it's through the chamber, or I see Lori, who's on our board, and I see Michael from Kentucky Works, and I've missed a bunch of people, but just thank you very much for the effort. It was great to hear some of the things. I'm not sure who actually said it, but the whole idea of this is listening. And so much of what we're trying to do, and with Stephanie's leadership, I'm very excited about what Stephanie's doing and what Mary Pat's doing as well. I think we're headed in the right direction, and we're trying to learn as much as we can so that we can advise the governor, so the KWIB can advise the governor in the right direction, get the collaborative moving stronger, and hopefully with Stephanie's leadership, we're going to make some big progress. And kudos to everything that's happening in Northern Kentucky. It's just been great. Thank you.
Thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, moving forward, again, we look to have these partner spotlights the first Wednesday of each month. If anyone is interested in presenting and getting on that calendar, we are a blank slate right now, and just we're really excited to share this particular program because of a lot of feedback we had gotten from our committee meetings. So keep your eyes open in the future, and we really do appreciate your time today. Everyone have a great afternoon.